Thursday, February 15th, 2018 meeting of the San Francisco SRO Task Force. My name is Rosemary Bosky. I'm chair. It is 9:01 a.m. And we have several items on today's agenda. However, we do have a guest speaker, which also includes one of our members, Larry Kessler from the Department of Public Health. So if, since we do have a quorum, and if there is no objection, what I'd like to do would be to address the minutes after agenda item number 4, so that we're not keeping the DPH staff so they could give the presentation on bed bugs. Is there any objection to doing that? There being none, then let's go to agenda item number 4, which is a presentation by the Department of Public Works regarding bed bugs and DPH enforcement. And I know there is a PowerPoint presentation. Do we have copies of that?
I didn't make copies of that.
Okay. We can, subsequent to today's meeting, send this out electronically to all the members and guests. So with that, I'm going to give the floor over to DPH, and I'm going to move out of the way here so that you've got room to give the presentation. And thank you very much for coming. And if I could ask the membership to give them a round of applause before, just because from looking at this was a great PowerPoint presentation, and I know they did a lot of work on this. So there you go. Thank you so much.
Just real quickly, I'll introduce Christine Durr. She's one of our senior. We have 2 SRO inspectors right now. We're hiring our 3rd one, hopefully really soon. So there's about, I think we have 700 hotels in San Francisco that we inspect on a routine and complaint basis. And so most of our focus is on the about 500 SROs. There's about 200 plus tourist hotels. Christine Durr is our senior inspector, and we also have Kevin Ng. He's the other inspector right now, senior inspector in San Francisco for the hotel inspection program. She's been an inspector for about 3 years total, 3 or 4 years. Came from the city of Berkeley, and she's been with us for 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. She's been an SRO in our program for a little over a year and a half. A lot of you may have known Mario Oblena, who ran the program for a long time. He retired last year. And he helped. I've also only been in this program a little over a year. So we're all kind of new, and Kevin as well. So we're learning as we go. Anyway, so we did, I think Christine and Kevin both went to a bed bug presentation that was put on by Clark Pest Control last week, which was insightful. And so anyway, here's Christine, and she'll do a presentation on bed bugs.
All right. So my district in San Francisco is parts of Soma and also Chinatown. So if there's any complaints in that area, it's probably going to be me that's addressing them. Okay. So these are the topics that we're going to go over really quick: bed bugs prevention, elimination, monitoring, and what we do in environmental health. So bed bugs, they're parasites. They require a blood meal to become an adult. They're flat, reddish brown color. They have 6 legs. They're often mistaken for roaches or other beetles or bugs. So this is their life cycle. When they haven't fed yet, they're flat. When they are fed, they become elongated and a little bit puffier. So they don't transmit disease. So why the public health significance is because it's a nuisance. They are some say it's annoying. They cause allergic reactions. Some people see it as if they're eaten by bugs. Some just see it as a bug that doesn't transmit disease. So there's 2 ways of looking at it. Inspectors are unable to identify bed bug bites. So when clients show us bites, we can't tell. Not sure if doctors could tell either, but we're not doctors. And also, just because clients don't have bed bugs in their home doesn't mean that their home is dirty or they're dirty or unsanitary or whatever, because they are hitchhikers and They could be easily transported. It could be on a chair. It could be in any public setting. So it's really difficult to know where they came from. So they could be found in nursing homes, schools, buses. It could even be in this meeting room. But it could just be anywhere.
Well, make us paranoid, would you?
It could also be luxury housing.
Yes, it could be. Yeah, like there's complaints in nice hotels too, or luxury hotels, residential hotels, anywhere, homes, mansions. I've had a lot of complaints when I was in Berkeley in nice houses on the hills in Berkeley. So it could be anywhere. So stopping one bed bug does a lot, a pregnant female. In 6 months, it can be a full-blown infestation depending on the environmental factors, like if they have blood, meals, or there's a human in there where they like to eat or feast on. So again, it's difficult to know where the infestation began. So we don't really find out where it began. We just look for the infestation in the room, so we don't go looking for wherever it came from. So prevention. So don't bring any items that were left on the street into your home if you absolutely have to. The best thing to do is to inspect it. Also seal cracks and crevices. It could travel from unit to unit, so it's really important to seal all openings, holes, whatever. Also, if you're in a hotel, it's important to inspect your belongings and the mattresses and furniture there too. That's just what I said. Also reduce clutter so that if something happens, it's easier to clean or get rid of the problem. So prevention is really hard. So I think the best thing is early detection. So monitoring traps and inspection is the best thing that you can do, is probably key. So those are bed bug interceptors. It's placed on the foot of the bed. It's not 100%. So because sometimes the bedding could touch the floor and could climb up to your bedding and could get on your bed. So, but those are just some tools that you can use. These are the signs that we look for bedbug infestation or activity. This is pretty exaggerated. This is probably really bad infestation. This is actually a picture I took. So those black stuff are the bedbug fecal matter, and then there's actually one bedbug right there in the middle picture over there. So this is pretty bad. This person actually didn't know that they had bedbugs. They just, he didn't react to the bites, so he just carried along with his life. He didn't really care. So, but the complaint came from the manager.
So in a case like that, then the problem would just be that the bed bugs would spread to the other units. If it's
Yes.
not necessarily his, he doesn't react to it.
Mhm.
So it's not a nuisance for him, but they
Yeah.
migrate.
So it's not a nuisance for him, and they could migrate. So the person living next to him could have bed bugs, not know where they came from, and continue to have it regardless of the treatment because the next door neighbor has it. So when we conduct inspections, we look at adjacent units, top, bottom, side to side, sometimes in the front too. So just to see if there's another source. So these are some of the types of treatment. There's probably more types, but there's vacuuming, heat, volumetric heat is heating up the whole room, insecticides, and freezing. Some of the heating numbers are a little different from what I found, but usually it's 122 degrees or higher for more than 2 hours, but I would personally leave it longer just in case it came to that. We don't recommend do-it-yourself treatments like Raid or diatomaceous earth, although diatomaceous earth does work sometimes if it's a small or slight infestation. And all of that is, or the types of treatment is dependent on the severity of the infestation, and it's also depending on what the pest control operator wants to use. Also, usually bed bugs infest the mattress because that's where the meal is, right, the human. So it's not necessarily a good idea to remove the bed because then it will infest other properties or whatever, because a lot of people like taking stuff off the street. So if someone has a bed bug issue, they have to prepare the unit for treatment. It's just not just the pest control going in there and then just doing their thing. The tenants definitely have to prepare their unit because the pesticides won't work in a cluttered area. The heat treatment won't work in a cluttered area. So it's really important to launder all the clothing, remove everything that you just don't need, move furniture away from the walls, and they definitely have to cooperate with management and pest control to allow access to inspections for treatment and follow-ups, and follow their guidelines. So the property owner's responsibility is to inspect the unit if there's a complaint, and also to be proactive to inspect units routinely and to verify that there are bed bugs. And typically they provide pest control. The minimum is 3 times. It could be more depending on the situation. It's also their responsibility in apartments or SROs to provide sealable plastic bags and also bed bug mattress encasements. But it also depends on the building, so not all of them are required to. Also, monitoring. So after the treatment is done, it's really important to see if it worked, or if there might be a reinfestation. So again, tenants have to report to the management in order just to kill off whatever is there so that it doesn't become a full-blown infestation again. And they should cooperate with each other. So environmental health. So what do? We follow this, Article 11.581. So bed bugs are a public nuisance. So when we receive complaints, they're usually from tenants, managers, owners, or social workers, case managers, who supported housing. We respond to complaints within 2 days. We conduct an inspection to verify the complaint to see if it's actually bed bugs. It could be something else. Property owners, again, must provide pest control from a licensed pest control company and provide service, not necessarily treatment, to adjacent units. Also, tenants have to prepare the unit for bed bug treatment to allow access for pest control. So all of this is great, but sometimes there's complications. Sometimes tenants could have issues in preparing their room. For example, it could be disability, mental illness, or other things that are happening. So we have a DPH licensed clinical social worker that could connect them to services if needed. So during inspection, if there's issues, then we have our social worker, her name's Yoon Jung Kim, and we take her along so that she can communicate with them and possibly conduct them to services. The client has to qualify for it, and also the services are only provided if the client allows. Yes?
Yeah, how do they qualify?
They have a whole list of criteria. Some of it is there needs to be a disability, a certain age group.
And I think financial too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
How much money they have, what their assets are.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question?
it would be good to let us know how do we refer people. Like I have never have seen tenants in our buildings getting service like help with connecting with services to help them treat the bed bugs.
Okay.
I haven't seen any of that happen.
Okay. Majority of the time, if it's on a complaint, if we see that the client or tenant is possibly unable to treat the room, or not treat the room, prepare the room for bed bug treatment, then we have our social worker come in and communicate with them, because that's her more expert in that area, so she can connect them with services if they qualify, for example, to APS, IHSS, or other services. Yeah.
So how long does it take from finding a problem in a room to getting to a director's hearing that can lead to possession of the unit?
Right. So services are only provided if client allows. Let's say they allow the service and they want to work with the APS to clean their room or prepare their room for treatment or whatever. If they allow it, then we give them initial 21 days to correct the issue, and we will work with them until it's abated, as long as they are following the service rules and making significant improvement on their end. But again, sometimes they don't want the service, so after it also depends on the situation too. So after about 2 to 3 inspections, there's no progress, they don't want services, then we can cite them to attend the abatement conference.
So best case scenario, how long would it take? Let's say they don't want the services, they refuse automatically, they just say, we're not going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
How long are we talking?
It can take anywhere from about 2 to 3 weeks to about, it really depends on the situation, a month or 2 months. Sometimes they do work with those services and then they stop, and then
I'm trying to get to a point where your earlier screen showed that, within a short period of time, this could become a big problem.
Right.
And that's why I'm trying to get to is like, well, is there anything in place that you're going to shorten this period, or is it just going to, because you earlier, showed the screen where from one bed bug it could get into thousands, and if there's a long time in between, and if it's not being dealt with quickly, it basically is infesting the whole building. So
Right.
I'm trying to kind of figure out if you guys have thought about shortening this period already.
Just real quick, I think if we saw that it's extremely severe and they denied services, then we have a process that we always go through, and it's our standard process, is we go to what's called an abatement conference, which Christine was talking about, and that's kind of the first step. That's every Tuesday. We have those available to us. The director's hearing, those are only once a month. And we have to, after the abatement conference, we have to give them time to try to make those corrections.
No, I know
and
that.
cooperate.
I've been through this, that's why I'm
Okay.
asking. Because
Yeah.
it does create a problem for the rest of the building, because if one unit is not getting
Correct.
cleaned,
The
and if they
problem
spread,
is,
like you said, they move from one to the other,
Yeah.
and there should be a system where it needs to be
the
addressed.
difficulty is the result of the director's hearing, like we have a couple today, is declaring the room a nuisance, which means the owner can take possession of the unit and
Go through eviction.
go through eviction, and that's, I think, not
Another 6 months.
not what our role is at the health department, to have people evicted. But so we do try to figure out, based on the severity, which is I think what Christine is saying. It's really based on each individual case of what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, you hit on it, Larry. Go to the director's hearing, the director orders possession of the unit, red tags the unit. What does that mean?
So what that means is the management or property owner takes control of the unit.
Okay, so the tenant's out.
The tenant.
Yeah.
Well, the
Tenant's out, we clean
management,
the
the
room.
owner, the owners need to take possession, so they have to go through their process of obtaining that room back.
What is that? UD?
I don't know what you
Another
do.
couple months.
Your lawful detainer eviction.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Often we end up just trying to contain an issue. What we do often, Christine and Kevin both had cases where the room's so bad, the only thing we can do going through this process is to keep it from spreading to the other rooms and an infestation.
How do you do that?
Just by pest control.
So,
Try to keep it from spreading.
So,
maybe this is a legislation issue that needs to be addressed.
We also have to give them time to clean it up, or the tenant. We also, it's due process, right? We have to give them time. Maybe they have help or whatever. They don't want the service help. Yes.
so just so I'm clear, so the end result of a director's hearing that goes sideways for the tenant is now the landlord has permission to go forward with a unlawful detainer. They don't physically get possession of the unit after the director's hearing.
All we really do is technically now we hold the owner responsible to abate the nuisance.
Perfect. That's a good plan.
That's what the health department does through this process.
That sounds fair.
Yeah. Okay. So we first go through the abatement conference if there's complications in correcting, and then after a period of time, the hearing officer gives another timeline for the tenant or manager, depending on the situation, to correct it or abate the problem. And then if that problem isn't corrected, then it goes to the director's hearing, where it could lead to a declaration of public health nuisance and lead to the repossession of the unit. It's a process. There's the Director's Rules of Regulations for Prevention and Control of Bed Bugs, which state the responsibility of the owners or management, and then the tenants, and then the pest control operators too. You guys have any more questions?
I do.
Yeah.
Clifford Gilmore, Central City SRO Collaborative. When you spoke earlier in the presentation regarding treatment as it relates to the protocols and guidelines, and you mentioned about self-treatment practices.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that, and Dan could probably speak to this as well, we have encountered over time in some of the housing stock that is exactly what's happening, whereby in some cases there are self-treatment practices. And so I'm curious as to how is your agency sort of tracking compliance? Is it driven by complaints or agency inspections?
So your question is about how do we keep track of self-treatment
Well, the compliance part where people are required by the protocols and guidelines to use a licensed pest control operator. And in some cases, that's not the case.
Well, yeah, that's through routine inspections and complaint inspections. There could be a mixture of both management using the do-it-yourself treatments, and then there's tenants doing that too. So when we see it, or if there's a problem, we have them get a licensed pest control service. We don't allow them to just treat themselves.
Yeah, I'm just saying it does exist. I'm not
Oh,
saying
yes.
it's widespread.
Yes.
Wolfgang Stuber, homelessness and supportive housing. You spoke, you had a slide there of a bed bug interceptor. Are those easily available somewhere?
So,
or are they commercially available? Or
yes.
are those the ones that strictly you use? Or?
Well, we don't provide it, but those are tools that you can buy. You can get them online. You can buy them at a drugstore, a hardware store. So they are available.
Okay. And then the second part of my question is pest control operators. There's
you have different, although they're all licensed, they have different avenues of treating infestation. Some of it doesn't seem to be very effective, and some are very effective in treating. Are there minimum standards for treating bed bugs that have to be followed? And, or are there mandated or recommended treatments that should be done?
Well, the ones that I see most often are either heat or chemical. Probably more chemical than heat because heat is very expensive. So for chemicals, I think the best or the protocol is to have the tenant prepare the room for treatment, and the licensed pest control operator they're the expert in treating the unit. So
I think, yeah, and Larry Kessler had a comment. I think also reading the label, EPA controls the label on pesticides, so it just has to be done in accordance with the label. We don't handle that aspect of whether or not the chemical is being used. We do have somebody at the health department who does, and in our ag department, which is in the health department. So if there are complaints and we have had complaints about pest control operators not using the chemicals properly, watering them down, things like that. That's not handled by our group, it's handled through our ag department and improper use of the chemicals. But they do have to use them in accordance with the label.
If I could jump in for a second, Rosemary Bosky, Chair, that issue has come up for DBI as well, because DBI also has the authority to enforce against bed bugs under the San Francisco Housing Code, and we follow the DPH regulations, which are very detailed as to what the protocol is. Following today's meeting, we will go ahead and put up on our website and send to everybody electronically. As I said, today's PowerPoint presentation, Jordan Davis has also given me a copy of something that the SRO
I gave you that.
Collaborative
That was not me.
has done. We
That
can
was
see
me.
if
That
that's,
was not me.
okay, if that's, oh, I'm sorry. To see if that's the latest version of that. We'll also go ahead and electronically put up on our website and send to all of you the current DPH rules and regulations regarding bed bugs. One of the things that DBI will do is if we suspect that the licensed pest control operator is not following the manufacturer's requirements, is to get documentation from them that they've treated the location pursuant to those requirements.
I have a question about, since you mentioned there's a lot of chemical treatment. This is Jordan Davis, tenant representative. I'm a little worried about, whether whether it might trigger chemical sensitivities in some people, and what you would do about, that type of issue that would come up with a client.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, some people might have allergic reactions to the chemical treatment, but they can ask the management for a different type of treatment. But usually if the pest control operator is following the label, then that's the most effective way to, yes, treat it.
Hi, Dan Jordan. I'm with the Central City SRO Collaborative. I'm also a tenant rep. One thing we've come across a lot, and even in my own experience, is getting the pest control operator to inspect the surrounding rooms. A lot of times they just say, oh, it's not necessary, or I don't have time.
Okay.
And I mean, they've pulled that with me as well. And it's like, no, you're going to take the time because I know the rules.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you do with the pest control operator that doesn't want to do his job properly?
Well, if there's a complaint, let's say about a particular room with a infestation or bedbug activity, we actually ask the manager to provide service to that room and then provide service to the adjacent room, not necessarily treatment, but service like inspection. And we actually ask for the invoices of those particular rooms too. So we do ask them to do that for us. So. Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Diana from Mission SRO Collaborative. I understand there's a timeline, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I just want to clarify this. Are there multiple sprays that take place? Or is it just one bed bug spray and then that's it?
The minimum that we require is at least 3, but it also depends on the severity. It could be more, and it also depends on the pest control operator too. But it's a minimum of 3.
And then each spray is how many weeks apart?
So usually it's 7 to 10 days apart, and then it could be 2 weeks after the second one, but it also depends on the pest control manager or the professional.
And that's mainly to deal with eggs that have hatched. Is that correct?
Yeah, because the pesticides don't kill the eggs, and then so it only kills the adults. And then, so after a week or 2, those are when the eggs hatch, and then that's when the second treatment comes. Yes.
Angela, with the Chinatown SRO collaborative, one thing I have seen happen in buildings is that the bed bug comes back again and again. So often, then the tenants gave up on treating bed bugs. They felt it's ineffective, it's going to come back. That raises a question of how effective the treatment are actually being done. A lot of times there's no connection between education to the tenants on the best of issues and also on the assistance they need that you have mentioned about. If they are seniors, disabled, they would not be able to get their furniture moved to the center of the room, for example, or in cases where they are cluttering the rooms, that the type of situation. And also, I have seen pest control operators. I don't know if it's the standard of procedure for tenants to get outside the building when they do the spraying, or they let the tenants around the building. I asked one spraying done, and the person doing the spray said, our chemicals are safe, tenants can stay in their place. So I'm not sure whether there's a safe chemical that you use on bed bugs that tenants do not need to get out of the building. I have seen tenants staying around in the hallway, the kitchen. So I wish there's some point to look at what happened to buildings that have bed bugs. I have seen inspection of bed bugs. I don't know how accurate the inspections are. I mean, inspections are done usually to the unit that complain about the bed bugs, and not on the other units. I think if we see a severe case of bed bugs, could it be possible to have traps set in the rooms to find out which room are actually infested with bed bugs? I think we need to be very thorough in finding the bed bugs. And seems like some bed bugs get away and some bed bugs come back. So I don't know what would be the best thing to do.
So the best way for management is to be proactive and conduct routine inspections and have the tenants cooperate in those inspections too, and allow management to place monitoring traps or just early detection is the key, right? So that's the best method. In terms of reinfestation, again, early detection. Whether or not the tenants could leave the building, if they're following the label, the EPA label of the pesticide that they're using and containing it, the tenants do have to leave the room, not necessarily the whole building. And the pest control is supposed to actually notify the building with some sort of notice that they are going to be applying pesticide.
I wonder, so once a complaint is given and someone inspects that unit, if they inspect the adjacent units, if there's no bed bug, they do not need to do anything. They just need to treat the room that's with bed bugs, right?
Right, but they would monitor the other units.
How do they monitor the other unit? Because as far as I'm concerned, I know that units are not being monitored.
Okay.
And how do you make certain that these things happen?
Mm-hmm. So they would place monitoring traps. That's a method of monitoring. But if someone like that's in the building that has bed bugs, they could file a complaint with our department by calling 311 or this other number, and then they can let us know the situation and we can investigate that. Yes.
So does the heat treatment kill the eggs? Or it
Yes.
doesn't?
So heat treatment does kill the eggs. The chemicals, not necessarily.
Okay, so if there is a heat treatment done, you still need 3 treatments, or
It
is
depends.
it 1 treatment?
It depends on the severity of the room, and it depends on the pest control operator. Generally, there's probably there's a series of the heat treatment, because sometimes again they don't get to all of the ones that are still alive, or if it's a heavily cluttered room, the heat treatment is not going to necessarily work.
So if you get it up to about 150 degrees, it should pretty much get it.
They probably won't get it up that high because it's probably going
You're
to
so
melt
fast.
things.
That's so small. I've done it.
I know.
So.
I've done it.
Well, if there's a lot of books, I understand, material that bedbugs can hide in.
Right.
I understand that, I mean, I get it, but
Like the outside your roast is 160, but inside there.
So it also depends on their equipment, how effective their equipment is. Yes.
In the process of heating or spraying for bed bugs, if any of the tenants' possessions get damaged, is there any type of compensation for that written in the bed bug ordinance, or?
No, that is, we don't get involved with that. That's between the tenant and the management, or,
Is there anything that enforces that in the bed bug ordinance as written?
no. Yes.
You just mentioned a few minutes ago about a unit that's being treated, but also sort of monitoring the adjacent units. So I think what I thought I understood previously with some of the when the housing code was amended for treatment and guidelines and protocols, that in fact the adjacent units needed to be treated as well, because bed bugs tend to be very sensitive and understand about pests, about insecticide treatment, and they would just travel knowing that something is about to occur over here. So I'm just wondering, is that part of what's required, or is it just to monitor? Because they're going to travel and get out of that unit anticipating that there's a pesticide.
Right, so the day of treatment, the pest control operator is supposed to, doesn't mean that they're treating it, service the adjacent units to see if there's any issues, and to see if there's any issues. And it's not necessarily they need to treat it because they follow the IPM, Integrated Pest Management. So the management is also supposed to monitor, and then the tenant is supposed to let the manager know if there's any signs of.
It would seem to me to be proactive.
Yes.
It would be a thing to do to be proactive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Earlier you mentioned the social worker that can help the tenant get connected to resources. How do we contact that social worker? Or how do we get them hooked up with the tenant?
So it would usually be through a complaint basis or a routine inspection. We would have to, hotel inspectors will have to see what's going on there first. If there's hoarding issues, if there's a bed bug problem, if there's cockroach problems where they have to prepare the unit and they're unable to do so, then we would have our social worker visit the tenant. So, yes.
I was just going to say real quick. So Christine does the hotels and Kevin, but we also have obviously thousands of apartment buildings as well that we routinely inspect, and we have complaints about bed bugs in apartment buildings as well. And I think the collaboratives also work with the apartment buildings. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So Christine and Kevin just do the SRO hotels. So the best thing would be just to contact the inspector assigned to that building to get connection to our social worker.
Okay.
If you wanted to go, if it was something where you felt that was. And the social worker was originally hired by us and is funded by us for kind of I guess it's now a mental health classification, so we're not supposed to say, let's just say excessive clutter. Hoarding, I guess, is not a term we're supposed to use anymore. But she was originally hired for that purpose, to focus on people with that disorder. We're recently now moving her into helping us address other issues that we're coming across. So originally it was for excessive clutter and hooking people up with those services, but we are now gradually moving into other uses for her. But the best way to be just to go through the inspector assigned for that area to get access to her and whether or not she can help provide services.
And on your website, does it say which inspector is assigned to which area?
I think I sent, you can call our general number. It's not on there, but we can provide that for you. And then you just call and they'll tell you who the inspector is. It's something we rotate every couple of years,
All right.
so it changes.
General number, the 3800?
Yeah, our direct line is ends in 3805. So our program is 252-3805. Yeah, it's 415-252-3805, and that's the Healthy Housing Program, which includes hotels and apartment buildings that are in our program.
As a historical footnote, the area that was recently revised by legislation from Supervisor Kent, probably within the last 5 years, it was a working group that was derived of some members actually from the SRO task force, amended the DPH director's rules and regulations for prevention and control of bed bugs. The housing code hasn't been recently amended. It always had jurisdiction over bed bugs, but as a secondary authority, with the health department being the first, since all the protocols and requirements fall in the health code. So that's a bit of history. It goes back, and there are some members on this task force that remember some of that discussion some years back. So.
All right, Mark with the City Attorney's Office. I just wanted to put out there that if inspectors from public health, or if you're having trouble actually getting into the unit, and then you're afraid that in and of itself might create a situation where it's going to spread, and you can't really prevent that. We don't do this often, but if inspectors are having trouble getting in, we can actually go to courts and get an inspection warrant to get into the unit to investigate the problem, because it really could be a public health hazard that could spread if it's not contained, as you were suggesting, because the process takes a while. Like I said, it's not a tool that's used very often, but if the tenant isn't being compliant, and if you're worried about it spreading and it's a real public health danger, it's something that you should know about when you're doing your inspections, DBI too, because it can be a useful tool to catch things, as you were saying, early detection.
Oh, great.
So just to throw that out there.
Mark, Bruce Bird, just a quick, first I've heard of this.
Yeah.
I've got tenants in every one of my buildings that absolutely refuse to allow pest control, maintenance people, smoke alarm inspection, anything at all.
Right, well, it has to be a serious,
we don't know.
can talk offline about it, but I think it has to be an issue. You have to check a lot of boxes before you get to that point, right? Like in terms of public health, or public safety at issue, in terms of what the government has done, what these folks have refused, and what sort of nuisance is there. But I'm happy to talk offline about because I think it's a tool, that can be totally abused, frankly, and I don't think it should go on that route. but I think it's a tool that is very underutilized, because if there are serious issues with a tenant where the tenant is at harm and maybe for mental health reasons or whatnot, they're not getting the help that they need, or if there's a situation where it could spread to other units. I mean, I think there's a reason why the government should be allowed to at least inspect and see if the level of dangerousness, so that things don't spread. And you can't just have a tenant say, no thanks, I don't want you to inspect.
Yeah, actually they do.
No, I'm saying, that's why that tool is there, for that reason. And there's a lot of process that we have to go through. You have to convince the judge that this is needed, when you can do it, and you have to try like X number of times before a judge is satisfied. So you kind of pick and choose the most serious. But I just wanted you to know that that is a tool out there.
Yes, and Bruce, there's a distinction to that. That would be for the government to go in to do the inspection. A refusal on the part of the occupant for treatment or whatever after that is something a little different.
Yeah.
This would just be for us to perform an inspection. Were there any other questions or discussions from the membership? Is there anything else that DPH would like to add at this point? I want to thank you so much for a great presentation. Thank you all. Very well done. And then before we go on to the next item, is there any public comment on this agenda item? There being none, then we'll go back to the previous agenda items. And that would be to discuss the minutes from December and January. I believe those have all been distributed. If I could ask the membership to take a moment to take a look at those. And since Jordan Davis was so kind to chair the January meeting, I did ask her through the administration staff to take a look at the minutes, and she chaired that particular meeting. And we did make, I think, some updates to both of those minutes. So let's begin with the December 2017 minutes. Are there any comments, revisions, corrections by the membership on those minutes? And specifically, those would be, what was the date of the December minutes?
December 21st.
December 21st, thank you.
I have a correction. I made it last month though. So
This is for the January minutes?
This is for December.
Okay,
minutes,
thank you.
But at the January meeting I brought it up, so it may already be written down. But in December, the report from this SRO collaborative was that we filled our vacancies.
Okay.
That we hired someone.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and make that correction. Thank you so much. Any other comments or questions regarding the December minutes?
I got a question. Like last month, they said that we were going to hold the December minutes for some fact finding, and I'm wondering if that came back, or if that's even going to be reflected in the minutes.
It is, yeah. We had to make, the fact finding was we had to check some items, so what we're presenting to you is inclusive of that.
Yeah.
So we have a clarification that we're going to make regarding the collaborative. Anything else regarding the December 21st minutes of 2017? Okay. Does the membership need a few more minutes to take a look at these? Or are you okay at this point? You're okay. Okay, so with that, with the clarification offered, can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
So Jordan makes a motion.
I'll second.
Dan seconds. All those in favor of approving the December minutes, can I have a show of hands? All those not in favor of approving the minutes, can I have a show of hands? Okay, so the December minutes are approved unanimously. That's December 21st, 2017. Then if we can move on to the January 18th, 2018 minutes. Jordan, do you have any comments you wish to make regarding these minutes?
Not really.
Okay. Are there any comments, clarifications, or recommendations associated with the January 18, 2018 minutes? Now, there being none, do I have a motion to approve them?
I move that we approve the minutes for the January.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll
Second by Dan. And let me pause for a second. Is there any public comment on any of these minutes? This being the December 2017 and the January 2018 minutes? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the January 18, 2018 minutes as presented. Can I have a show of hands that are in favor of adopting those minutes? And anybody opposed? Okay, so the January 18 minutes are approved as presented. So that is agenda item number 3. We've already addressed agenda item number 4. So now let's go to administrative announcements. I, again, want to thank Jordan for chairing the January 18th meeting. And I do understand that one of the important topics having to do with amendment of the housing code regarding gender-neutral specification for the common bathrooms and SROs was signed by the mayor. Was that yesterday?
It was yesterday.
So I'm going to go ahead and hand the floor over to you because this is a significant announcement. Go ahead,
It's
George.
very significant. The legislation passed as usual. A lot of about a dozen people from different community organizations came to land use. It then went through first reading, final passage. That night, the city hall got lit up in trans colors. You might have seen it Tuesday night, marking the occasion. And yesterday, Mark Farrell signed the legislation into law, and it'll go into effect March 16th, which I'm gonna follow up on a few complaints that I've made about that. And I just want to clarify one thing to the membership, that I didn't intend for this to be the first thing I really wanted to champion, because it's because I didn't want to make it all about my identity, but it was just such low-hanging fruit, and it was Pride Month, and I'd been already talking with Ronan's office for some time about this. So it's just like that, and I look forward to, and I said this in the Bay Area Reporter article, that I look forward to working on stuff that doesn't have to do with my identity, because that's, and I've already got a few legislative projects I'm working on that don't. So just proud day, but the work continues.
Thank you. Any other administrative announcements? I have one. I want to thank Nicole Rossini for stepping in today. Nicole is back with the Housing Division. We're happy to have her back. From time to time, she will be helping out with the SRO task force. Jennifer will continue. She just couldn't make today's meeting. I don't have any other administrative announcements. So, is there any public comment on this item? This is agenda item number 5. Then now let's go on to agenda item number 6. This will be the reports from the SRO collaboratives. Do we have any specific reports or announcements or any information that the collaboratives would like to share?
Clifford Gilmore,
Thank you,
City
Clifford.
Collaborative. January 26th, I mentioned this at the January meeting, that we actually held our program retreat to sort of analyze, as an outreach organization, the work that we're doing in the community. So it was held on a Friday, about a half-day retreat, and about 50 people in our program, including staff. And so just look at everything that we did in 2017, and people really wanted to reflect on accomplishments and challenges and things of that nature. And so it's really good just sort of go back and look at over the course of the whole year what you did and whether or not you were effective and how you can continue to serve the community. So that was good.
Thank you so much. Any other reports? Oh,
Raul Fernandez de Sala with the SRO Families United Collaborative. Just a brief update. First, I want to thank DPH for facilitating a training we're having on February 22nd for our peer organizers about code enforcement. Also, I want to thank Diana and Angela because we're beginning the planning for the family leadership training of this year. We're beginning the development of the curriculum, which the training is going to start from April 5th and will go on until May 10th. Also, Chinatown CCDC policy analyst Matias Marin is helping us guide the 5-year plan of the collaborative. The Coalition on Homelessness just filled one of their peer organizer positions that have been vacant for a little while. Really nice lady that is going to be very enthusiastic and quite an asset for the collaborative. And the last, we have scheduled our Family Appreciation Day for July 14th. It's going to take place in Golden Gate Park to celebrate the families that live in SROs.
And is there announcement for that? Sorry, Wolfgang Stuber.
good, Wolfgang.
Is there an announcement for where families and SROs can see that and or join or?
We'll create a flyer. I'll bring it for the next meeting.
Any other reports from SRO collaboratives? There being none, is there any other membership discussion about that? Is there any public comment on this item having to do with reports from SRO collaboratives? There being none, let's move to agenda item number 7, prioritization for future meetings. I have a couple items here, service regarding service animals, immigration. I also want to add another one to find out if there's interest from some of the members regarding the soft story program. Do some of the owners and operators, are you seeing that that's going to affect your membership, the soft story program? Are you seeing any impacts there on that? Where you would maybe like to have somebody come in and give a presentation on it? I'm just wondering, I'm just kind of throwing it out there just to see if it's something that would be of interest, because this is primarily the ground floor, but I'm just wondering, it probably doesn't affect as many residential hotels as apartment buildings and
It
other.
affects a lot of residential hotels, Rosemary, but it really doesn't necessarily directly affect tenants. And most of the work is done on the
ground floor.
which is commercial or
Okay.
empty space.
And I was thinking in
Low-grade
terms of,
commercial.
when I said that, I was thinking in terms of the overall numbers, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's because the hotels are a smaller number than the apartment buildings. Volume-wise, it's a lot more other buildings,
True,
but.
yeah, I don't
but-
tend.
So that you don't, that wouldn't be something that you think that is going to be of interest? That's fine, I was just asking, because we could bring
Well, my
somebody.
opinion, I don't say maybe.
Yeah.
it's a-
Well, I don't think it would be for this task force.
Okay.
But more so if you did do a presentation for the owners or something, that would be probably.
And they're doing that independently, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just wanted to throw that out there. For any of the other membership, is there anything of interest of that? Does everybody understand that certain buildings are soft story and they have to do seismic retrofitting that is primarily focused on the ground floor? We are hearing, and not necessarily with respect to residential hotels, but in DBI, specifically in the housing division, issues surrounding tenants and other types of uses that are being impacted. Because of property owners and more of apartment buildings electing to do additional work as they've pulled out a permit for the seismic retrofitting, and the Department of Building Inspection is asking that any additional work beyond what that program requires be done by separate permits, so that there's some distinctions there. But we are starting to hear issues of tenants being displaced or some indication of that, even though this program is typically dealing with the ground floor. So the idea there is to try and keep that at a minimum, if at all. So, okay, that was just something I wanted to just get some feedback from all of you. Wolfgang?
Is there Walking next to homelessness and supportive housing, is there a list available of the buildings that it affects?
Of those buildings,
Yeah.
yes, there is. And if you would like, I can have Nicole get that information and email it to you.
Thank you.
It's part of the overall CAPS program. It originally started as a voluntary program, and then there was subsequent legislation that made requirements triggered on a phasing program depending upon, various criteria and the size of the buildings, et cetera. So, and that's been ongoing now for quite a while. So we've got, as I mentioned, a couple things. On the issue of the service animals and immigration, I would like to get a little bit more feedback on the type of guest speakers we should hunt down for those. So if you want to think about that, Jordan, and we can either talk about it now or we could talk about it offline. But then I know, Bruce, there were some issues that you wanted us to pursue as well. So now that we're like in looking at maybe another quarter of meetings, and trying to line up inspectors maybe 3 or 4 months in advance, what else you would like to have here as far as topics and or guest speakers, let me know so that we can work towards getting those individuals here.
With,
Jordan?
in terms of the immigration thing, I would suggest reaching out to the Office of Community Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, like someone from that department.
And what topic do you want them to address with respect to immigration?
Probably like leaning towards more housing, and I'm also thinking about getting someone from David Chu's office, because he worked on a piece of legislation that passed last year that basically says landlords can't harass people over their immigration status, and basically gives a private right of action for violation of those rules.
Okay, and we do have to make sure that we stay within the mandate of the task force. So,
Exactly,
so would do that in the context of how that, relates more specifically
That's-
to the.
That's pretty much what I was thinking.
Yeah, good. Okay. Any other topics for future meetings?
I know we're getting a little backlogged here, but there's a piece of legislation that's going to likely be coming out next week. It's kind of a blind item right now because sensitivity. It has to do with the rights of tenants in nonprofit hotels, and I can't say much more, but the sponsor's going to be introducing it next week, and I don't know how fast she wants to move it through the process, so just will be revealed next week, and we might want to have a conversation about it in March. Might be something the task force really would want to discuss.
Okay, any other discussion on this particular item? Is there any public comment on this item? With that, is there any general public comment on items that were not on today's agenda? There being none, it is now 10:04. We are in adjournment. Our next meeting will be here in this room at 9 a.m., March 15th. Thank you all so much for getting here. Timely.
Put out a request for qualifications, and then a nonprofit provider can come in and say, we'll come in with this combination of tax credit financing and city financing to build housing there. And so the nonprofit becomes the owner of the site, but they have a 55-year affordability agreement, and the city loans them the money in that agreement so that they have to keep the units dedicated for homeless, very low-income people for 55 years.
Is that similar to what the Housing Authority did recently?
Yes. Yeah, it was kind of a way of the Housing Authority refinancing their portfolio. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I just had one more question, because like you say, the budget for HSH is 239, 240.